I mentioned this yesterday. The Rockefeller Foundation has just launched something called the Impact Investing Network, the Global Impact Investing Network. And I think we're going to see a whole new era of investment assets and financing strategies, which are not purely public and they're not purely commercial, but there's some hybrid in between that are leveraging your financial resources and other assets from both sectors. And so that the whole area of sort of innovative financing mechanisms, I think we're going to see a lot more of. And some of the global health partnerships, I think, are already demonstrating this, like the Global Alliance on Vaccines have done some very interesting work with multi-million-dollar public sector funding and sort of advanced purchase agreements to enable developing country governments to purchase vaccines. And at the other end, they're working with Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation to enable the Hong Kong Bank to sell what they're calling vaccine bonds to you and me as retail investors. And we've all sort of had those of us who had anything in the stock markets at all have taken a bit of a dive in recent months. But why can't we have vaccine bonds and water bonds and other types of investments where we're linking investors in developed countries to needs in developing countries with some sort of government support and credit guarantees in the middle? So those are sort of two in the core business models and supply chains. I think two innovations that we're going to see more and more of, these sort of business-to-business partnerships between companies from different sectors, as well as sort of sector-wide initiatives, and also many, many innovative financing mechanisms. So that's the sort of first category of business engagement, and I think the most important if we're serious about scale. But the second category, which I think increasingly gets dismissed, and it shouldn't get dismissed, is how do we leverage philanthropic dollars and community investment more effectively? It's sort of quite popular now to say it's all about the core business, and the core business is important, but if you actually add up the philanthropic dollars of just the companies in this room, we did a study, which some of you know, about 8 years ago now, with the United Nations Development Programme. We looked at 50 corporate foundations and companies, and just those 50 corporate foundations and companies, very conservative, just looking at the foundation budgets and the philanthropy budgets, was almost equal to the United Nations Development Programme's entire operating budget for the year. Now, and a lot of that money, stays here in the States or in Europe, but if we can leverage the philanthropic dollars as well as the people and the product donations of companies more effectively, I think there's enormous potential to achieve scale. And not only to achieve scale, but also to build real capacity in developing countries. I think one of the most interesting trends we've seen in the last 10 years in corporate philanthropy and volunteering is a much stronger focus on building local capacity of local non-profit organizations, local individuals, and actually building skills that, as Dr. Anna said, sort of stay in the countries and communities where they're needed. But three very quick sort of areas on scaling in the philanthropic area and social investment area, which I think offer great potential, are first of all what I would call common platforms, or common sort of philanthropy platforms, where you get groups of companies working with groups of non-profit partners. And I won't steal Bill Brindley's thunder here, but I think one of the most interesting we're going to hear from this morning is Net Hope, where you've got a group of the humanitarian agencies working with a group of the information technology companies, and together achieving much greater scale than each one could do on their own. And it doesn't mean one isn't also doing the individual projects, but these sort of scaling platforms I think we're going to see more of. Another example, I know there's some health companies in the room, is the Partnership for Quality Medical Donations, where, again, the humanitarian agencies in America who are doing disaster relief and humanitarian response to disasters, got together with all the companies that are donating medicines. And again, they're going to continue doing their own medicine donations, but they got together to set common guidelines and a common platform for how to ensure that medical donations were done not only efficiently, but also in an accountable, responsible manner. And so those are just sort of like two examples, and I think we're going to see more and more examples of your companies coming together. I know we were talking at one of the sessions yesterday about global road safety, which road accidents are one of the biggest killers and sort of health burdens in developing countries. And a number of the auto companies have got together with some of the energy companies and a few others to set up the Global Road Safety Partnership. And again, sort of giving philanthropic money as well as core competencies, but doing it collectively to have much more scale than they can on their own. So I think we're going to see more of those. One area where BCLC should think about is the whole area of science and technology and math education. We're beginning to work together more collectively in this country, but so much of our focus on education in Africa and elsewhere is on basic education. How can we actually help to support universities and science and math and technology education in low-income countries? And I think a number of the companies who are working in the room on that topic area could work more collectively together. Two other areas of sort of scaling in philanthropy very quickly are the second was what I'd call geographic clusters, where groups of companies are working together in a particular developing country on a more sort of systems-wide basis. So something like the Angola Partnership Initiative, which Chevron started with USAID, but has now got local banks involved, has got local agribusiness companies involved, has set up a national microfinance bank within Angola, and is having a much more systemic impact again than just one initiative on its own. Abbott started something called the Tanzania Care Initiative, which is building capacity of hospitals throughout Tanzania and actually helping through diagnostic materials, logistics advice, working with the government, working with non-profit organizations, other companies, to strengthen the ability of small district hospitals to serve the people who come to them better. And so it's a difficult sort of thing to sort of tick a box and say, we've had a real impact, and yet by sort of strengthening the capacity of the health system, it's having a much more scalable impact in a particular location than just a one-off project could do on its own. So I think we're getting these sort of common issue platforms, we're getting these geographic clusters, and then the third area of scaling, which obviously has, I think, enormous potential in the sort of philanthropic and sort of volunteering mobilization of both money and people, or treasure and talent, as it's sometimes described, is the whole use of social networking and technology platforms to link either volunteers or donors and your individual donors and volunteers in developed countries with initiatives and projects in developing countries. So something like Kiva.org, which I think now has, something like 500,000 individuals, or close to 500,000 individuals, giving small amounts of money through Kiva to individual women entrepreneurs and micro-entrepreneurs in Africa and elsewhere. Or Facebook, which I think now has something like 170,000 causes are listed on Facebook, and of its sort of 200 or so million subscribers, about 25 million of them are linked up to one cause. So I think the whole role of social networking and social technology, both to raise awareness of development issues, but also to link resources on a scalable way, is another area where there's enormous potential to leverage philanthropy. And I think corporate foundations were just beginning to get your heads around the enormous potential to use some of those social networking platforms, both, as I say, for raising awareness about issues, but also mobilizing resources through employees, through retirees, through customers, all sorts of ways I think that one can engage using social networking as an intermediation point. And linking to that, your diaspora funds, actually getting diasporas to work both on an individual volunteering basis, but also diaspora funds, which we're seeing more and more now of setting up. And then finally, so there's the sort of the core business models and value chains. I think secondly, the sort of innovation around scaling and leveraging philanthropy and social investment. And then third and last, I think there's enormous potential, and a couple of people raised this in sessions yesterday, about working together to improve governance and accountability and sort of public advocacy and diplomacy, and that each individual company can, if you're an American company, make sure that one's complying to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. But what do we do collectively to try and improve transparency and accountability in some of these very, very difficult countries? And I think there's a great role for AmCham and the AmChams around the world here, to work with local partners on corporate governance and improving both corporate governance and government accountability, supporting a free and open media. And I think we're also seeing more individual sector initiatives like the Equator Principles, where the banks are working together to improve the environmental impact of project finance, or the extractive industries Industries Transparency Initiative, where the oil and mining companies are working together to improve transparency of oil revenues. And so I think in every industry sector now we're seeing these accountability coalitions emerging, which are also, I think, a new innovation that will help us to scale from the individual projects.